Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Paranormal Insight. I'm your host, Tim Sedano. With me tonight is Dr. Barbara Stone and Dr. Robert Alcorn. Did I get it right? I hope
A
so.
mouthful.
Yeah, well, it is for my poor mouth. So welcome, Dr. Stone. Welcome back, Dr. Robert. Thank you for joining us today. Give me a brief introduction on who you guys are and what you do and all that fun stuff.
I am Barbara's assistant, uh, chauffeur, lawnmower, and carrier of luggage. I am a recovering psychiatrist. I retired after 50 years of doing that.
Wow.
And for 20 plus years, 24 years, I've been pursuing a study of subtle energy healing. And this led me into learning about shamanic healing and then to meet Barbara and doing her version of healing, which she calls soul detecting. We've been together for 12 years and married for 8. So I practice soul detective now. That's all I do. I don't do any psychiatry anymore. And I help Barbara with the teaching.
Excellent. We know Dr. Barbara's story for the most part. What you just said kind of leads me into my first question. There was how do I'm sorry, Dr. Stone, you're a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, is that correct?
I'm a retired social worker.
Oh,
I
okay.
do have a doctorate in clinical psychology, but the rules are
Psychology.
you have to be licensed to call yourself a psychologist. And I never got the license. I
Okay,
never
gotcha.
completed it.
Okay. Still, you study the disciplines of psychiatry, both of you, or right?
Studied a lot of psychology,
Yeah.
yes.
And you both have that background. So how did two people with doctorates in that field fall into the shamanic healing, the soul detective work, the work regarding the alien intergalactic? I don't know how to put that. The well, hopefully I'll have
Talk
a bit.
therapy,
Go ahead.
talk therapy is great. People need to talk, they need to tell their stories. But after I was diagnosed with breast cancer 33 years ago, I prayed to Spirit, use me as you will, whatever is most needed. And then a woman came into my practice who was the survivor of satanic ritual abuse. That's what she told me. And her stories were so horrible. I got very traumatized just listening to her stories. And I needed to get some more tools to help her. So I joined a group in Massachusetts where I was living at the time, which was a trauma specialist and worked with dissociative identity disorder, which we called multiple personality back then. And they said, you have to learn how to handle trauma. This is a level of trauma that's way outside the norm. So I started studying energy therapies for her. And that's how I got started. And then one thing led to another. She brought her deceased father's ghost with her to a session. So I had to learn how to deal with ghosts. And she had detrimental energies that were plaguing her. So I had to learn how to deal with that.
Okay.
I was led there by what came up in my caseload. How about you, Bob?
Yeah.
Well, for many years, even since medical school, I have been pursuing a spiritual path in one way or another, trying to find a way to relate that approach to life to the work I'm doing with patients without a whole lot of success. Nothing really seemed to take very well, although there were some odd things that would happen in the office. Uh, which led me to think that there was something else going on besides the two of us talking to each other, patient and me, like there's a benevolent spirit helping at some certain points. But the real, I think, impetus was an experience I had in the early 90s. So that's 30 plus years ago. I can't remember the exact year now. My eldest child was away at college, so I went to visit her parents' weekend. And at the end of the day on Saturday, I decided to walk to the hotel, which was about a mile away in downtown Providence, Rhode Island. And I had heard that Providence was not the sort of place you want to walk around at night in, but I just ignored that and said, I'm going to do this. I borrowed her umbrella because there was a little bit of a drizzle, and it happened to be red and had lace on the edges. So I was a bit of a strange looking character walking down the hill and across the main square of Providence, looking like an older man, I think, even then, and carrying a funny looking umbrella. And I had a backpack on. And as I'm walking down the public square toward the hotel, which is about 100 yards away, there were no lights anywhere except for the hotel was lit up.
Hmm.
And there were no people walking around, just the big office or bank buildings on one side and a parky area with trees on the other side. And I heard a voice out loud, which said to me, there's a man in the alley. He's going to run out and grab you. There's nobody there to say that. So what do you do if you're a psychiatrist and you start hearing voices at the age of 49?
Gotcha.
And so I said, what? And the voice responded, there's a man in the alley. He's going to run out and grab you. Didn't say you big dummy, but it felt like that.
It had that tone to it. It's like,
yeah, there was a kind of a like, how stupid
annoyance.
Can you be? I said pretty clearly. So I said, okay, I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend you. What should I do? Should I make a mad dash for it across the alley? Or should I run down the other side of the park and go that way back to the hotel? The voice said, just walk across the alley. So that's what I did. I walked across the opening of the alley, and this young man came running out and grabbed me by the left arm, carrying the umbrella in the right arm. And I thought, this is the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. I want to see who this guy is.
Right.
So I slowly turned toward him, dropped the umbrella behind me, looked at this guy who was about my size, 5'11", 6 feet tall, but much younger and much more fit. And I looked at him and he looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And he ran away. Well, I was not expecting that. I'm not a tough guy. I never considered myself to be a tough guy. In fact, I was bullied in school because I was skinny and sickly. So this was a shock. Something scared him. Then I waddled back to the hotel. I was scared at that point. Up until then, I wasn't afraid until he ran away.
Gotcha.
I sat down on the chair in my room and I thought, my world is now officially upside down.
Yeah.
My sense of what's real and what isn't real has been flipped over entirely, and I don't know what to do about this. So what I did was forget about it. But it kept nagging at me subconsciously, and I began to think there's got to be something to this. I don't know what happened here exactly, but so I went to a psychic or two or three and asked them, among other things, what was this experience? Why did this guy run away from me? The one who I ended up trusting the most said, because he saw the head of one of your spirit guides floating above your head.
Okay. Wow. Spirit guides.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Said, okay, which spirit guide is this? Because we've been talking about spirit guides, and she said, it's not one that I know. Let me find out. So she focuses in again and she starts to laugh. What's so funny? Well, first of all, he's a giant, and he says his name is Pixie.
Ironic names, you gotta love it.
It's not the kind of thing you expect in a seance, to get humor from a
Right.
disembodied spirit. And then he said, by the way, you didn't need my help. I still don't know what that means, but apparently I shouldn't be so afraid of people. So I began to pursue how to improve my intuition. And I started writing down my dreams.
Oh,
I began to get some clarity from dreams, some messages. And one of them, just to make it very short, gave me some hints that directed me to study subtle energy work, hands-on energy work with a teacher named Rosalind Bruyere, who's pretty well known for that. She's based in California, and I went to a bunch of her workshops and started studying with pupils of hers who lived in my town, Cleveland, Ohio at the time. And that's how I got into doing hands-on energy work.
and
And then
that's
one thing,
is that I'm sorry, is that also known by Reiki? Am I thinking of the same thing?
Reiki is a different discipline.
Okay.
It's similar in some ways, but Rosalind's teaching comes from the Hopi Nation
Okay. Gotcha.
and spirits who talk to her. She's very clairvoyant and sees energies and all that stuff. And the Hopi approach to dealing with white people is that they really need to be grounded. Their auras are 3 feet disconnected from the earth. Aura starts at about the waist and goes up. So everything starts from the feet on the ground. And Reiki is more connecting to the Reiki guides that are up here somewhere, out in some other dimension. Rosalind wasn't very impressed with Reiki, but I think Reiki, whether it's good or not, depends a lot on who's doing it, what other disciplines they've been open to. I've had some Reiki done on me, and I've gotten, what do you call it? Attuned.
Mm.
But I don't recall what I do Reiki. It's whatever Rosalind said it was. Touch
Okay.
healing, she called it. I don't do much of that now. I learned later about shamanic work, and the group I was with studying soul retrieval, which is a native practice.
Hmm.
They were all excited that there was a psychiatrist in the group. Out of 58 people, there were 2 psychiatrists. It's pretty amazing. I never saw the other one again after that.
Well,
But people would come up to me and say, this is amazing that a psychiatrist is coming to take this training. You really ought to learn depossession. You've probably seen a lot of people who are possessed.
in your
And I said,
practice,
well,
that was
30
the
years,
suggestion?
30 years of practice, I've never seen anybody who was possessed.
Okay.
So the face drops. Oh my God, he's closed after all. What's he doing here?
Gotcha.
But there's a piece of advice from the 12 steps, which I had learned through my association with people who are in the 12 steps, which is that if 2 or 3 people tell you the same thing, you probably ought to listen. I love these little bits of stuff from the 12 steps. So I started taking the depossession training, and I did that for quite a while. And studied with Betsy Bergstrom, who is a shamanic teacher who teaches that. And then I met Barbara because I made a video of doing a depossession with one of my patients. And I did a presentation of it, and she came to the presentation. That's how we met.
No, that's fantastic. Right on. So, okay. So, Dr. Barbara, what brought you to that class?
Well, one of my students was the organizer for that class, and she
Oh,
called me up and she said, Robert Alcorn is coming to speak for our metaphysical group, and he does similar work to you. So I want to plan it at a time when you can be there. So I looked at my calendar and I found a date when I'd be back from Costa Rica for the winter. And then also he needed a PowerPoint projector. So I brought my projector, and we had some email communication before that.
excellent. Outstanding.
She got us together because she spotted that we did similar work.
Oh, that's neat. That's cool. So, now you kind of answered it, but I guess I'd like a more firm answer, for lack of a better term. How does your current work gel with your more clinical backgrounds? I mean, there's obviously a collision there between what, yeah, big time, like Rams and stuff. uh, Between, shamanic work and clinical psychiatry. So, did you reconcile this somehow? And if so, how?
Well, I don't see it as a clash. Let me talk about medicine in general.
Okay.
I would have died 5 times if it weren't for Western medicine. From starting when I was 8 weeks old and had pneumonia, then my appendix ruptured, then cancer,
Wow.
many other things. So, and I just had surgery to improve my eyesight. And it's amazing what Western medicine can do, but it doesn't go far enough because it only deals with the physical body. We also have an energy body,
Yeah.
and acupuncture helps regulate energy flow. We have an emotional body, which is what talk therapy is usually about, dealing with your emotions. We have a mental body and a spiritual body. And traditionally, they leave out the spiritual world. But there are so many things from that body, which is bigger than all the others, that affect us. And my talk therapy training and diagnosing people and sending them to the psychiatrist when they needed it, it just didn't go far enough. It doesn't solve the origin of the problem. And I wanted to get to the root of what was making them ill. So I added that to talking and making a relationship with someone, which is the heart of any therapy. How about you, Dr. Robert?
Well, that's been a big problem. There is no place in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association for normalizing the hearing of voices. There are people at Yale actually who are studying voice hearing from an open-minded point of view, not starting from the assumption that it's a pathology.
Oh, well, that's encouraging.
So that's a little bit of interesting. I don't know what they're doing now because I don't pay any attention to Main Street medicine anymore.
Gotcha.
But one of the things I noticed in my practice over 50 years, private practice, mental health center practice, working with homeless people, being a court psychiatrist, when I had a patient who was intuitive by nature, who had some psychic skills, whether they practiced as a psychic or not, they did not do well in traditional therapy at all. And the medicines, particularly the antidepressant medicines, the SSRI, serotonin type drugs, tended to agitate people like that. And they also had other allied problems, such as attention problems and so forth. And the first problem they had was trusting a psychiatrist. Because if you tell a psychiatrist you think you've got a ghost in your house and it's a problem for you, they're going to start trying to decide which antipsychotic medicine to give you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I discovered by my own experience that ghosts can cause emotional problems. The way I discovered this was when I was in the depossession training. It was a 5-day intensive at a nice retreat center in Oregon. On the first day, the teacher, Betsy, was describing the phenomenon of spirit attachment. It's not always possession. There are various degrees to which a spirit can attach to a person.
Right.
Anywhere from taking over the whole person and running the show, or just barking at them from outside. So here's this list of the signs and symptoms of spirit attachment. It was a complete compendium of every known psychiatric symptom. I read
Oh,
that and I almost fainted. what am I going to do now? Everything
Wow.
I've been doing in my life, my professional life, it's got the wrong intellectual basis altogether.
Wow.
So I'm watching to listen to the talks and so on. And periodically, somebody in the class would get agitated. There were about 30 people, so she put them in the middle of the class, do a depossession on them. So we got to see a number of demonstrations. Because when a person was getting agitated, it was because there was a conflict between the spirit attached to them and the host.
Gotcha. Okay.
As I'm watching all this, I started to remember an incident that happened to me in 1966. That was the year I graduated from college. I went to Europe for the summer. And I was in an art gallery in Italy looking at some painting I can't remember the name of now or who painted it. In a gallery I was alone. There was nobody there, not even a guard. And I felt someone attack me from behind. That's what it felt like to me. And I had a panic attack.
Hmm.
So I had to leave the museum. To my chagrin, I found out you can't just come back in, you have to pay again. I was just a student, you know.
Right.
At any rate, that was one of those things that was anomalous and strange because I was not prone to panic attacks. And then I forgot about it, of course.
Hmm.
So here I am 41 years later, 2007, thinking about that repeatedly. It's like I'm getting obsessed with that memory now. On the second day, I realized that was a dead guy. That was a spirit who jumped into me. Because I could recognize the phenomenon now. This was one of the signs of spirit attachment, is a sudden panic attack.
Hmm.
And he was listening to the same lectures I was. Through my eyes, he's watching all this stuff. And he'd figured out what his situation was, apparently. Then I started to feel his head sort of partway out over to my right.
Huh.
Like he was separating from me a little. Then it was my turn to get worked on. But we were working on each other by then. And the person who was paired up with me was, in her professional life, was a short order cook in a diner. And the poor thing freaked out about the idea that she was going to do the psychiatrist. So they had to call one of the assistants, the class assistants, to come over. And they did their little thing, and it was kind of a voluntary dissociation between knowing who I am and who this other thing is. Then I could communicate with him mentally.
Hmm.
He told me his name, that he was British. He'd come to Italy on holiday, and he had taken his life by jumping off a building.
So
So
this guy's been riding around in you for 44 years?
41 years,
41 years?
and some really remarkable psychics and healers had worked with me, and nobody said, "Bob, do you know there's somebody else in there?"
Huh.
Nobody said that. I think Rosalind might have known it, but I don't think she wanted to tell me because she didn't want to deal with that.
Gotcha.
It's not in front of everybody. Anyway, she never said anything. So I guess he could hide well. That's probably the reason
I guess so.
part of that. So at any rate, once he figured out he was actually dead and that suicide was not going to send him to hell, he got sent to the world of light. And I stopped having any depression.
Oh, that's amazing.
That took 20 minutes to do that, not 5 years of therapy. So I thought this is really cool. I've got to try this. The next morning I woke up and just checked around inside to make sure he wasn't still there. He wasn't. In fact, my wife, second wife, not Barbara, when I got home from that, noticed a change in me, and she said, "What's happened to you? You're not Eeyore anymore." If you don't know who that is, that's from Winnie the Pooh, and
The
he's
Pooh, sure. The donkey, yeah.
a donkey who's always in a bad mood. Hmm.
Sorry, that just tickles me to no end. Please continue.
That was kind of an objective evaluation of what happened to me. Because I hadn't told her what had happened yet. All right, at any rate, The problem after that was, as I started seeing patients, new patients coming in, they would have obvious signs of spirit attachment on them,
Uh,
like darkness around the eyes. I never even thought about that. That's not something you look at as a psychiatrist, but I started seeing it. New patient comes in, they've got this and that wrong with them. They just came out of the state hospital and are on 6 meds for 6 different illnesses, blah, blah, blah. And what's really happening is they've got somebody there that's not them
mm,
inside. Now, how am I going to deal with this in the context of a public mental health center? So I
yeah,
tried to figure out ways to do that, being the medical director of a center where the other doctors didn't seem to want to stick around. And I did. I worked there for 16 years. So I acquired a certain, what shall I say? I was the 800-pound gorilla. I could kind of do what I wanted to a certain extent. And I
gotcha.
could control my schedule. So I would schedule an hour for follow-ups for some of these people, not 15, 20 minutes. And try to work a way of getting into doing something like hypnotic work.
Gotcha.
So in the context of doing, let's say, mindfulness meditation, I could lead people to discover that there's something inside that doesn't belong there and start dialoguing with it, which is what I learned from Betsy Bergstrom. And I did some of that in that setting. And sometimes it went really well. But I learned, among other things, that in my first interview with people, I would routinely ask them, do you have any unusual phenomena happening in your house? And they would talk about hearing footsteps in the attic and the dog is barking up the stairs to the attic. And everybody in the house knows there's a ghost there because they can all see these things that are happening. TV is going on and off by itself. The
Yeah.
lights, or the faucet in the kitchen turns on and off by itself. It's not just one crazy person. Everybody in the house experiences this.
Right.
So I had to learn how to get that information from people without putting up their psychiatry warning. If I tell them this, is he going to lock me up?
Yeah.
There are a few times when I probably was a little too enthusiastic and not careful enough in who I was choosing to work with. So I did that for a long while, and then as things progressed, I ended up with so many patients in that setting in the public mental health center, I didn't have time to do hour appointments, even if I wanted to set it up like that.
Hmm.
And then I was finding that I was getting very drained by doing the work in that setting, seeing 20 patients in a day and just doing medication refills and so on. I no longer felt like I was a doctor. I
Gotcha.
felt more like a drug pusher.
Mm.
So at any rate, I retired in 21 and did not realize the extent to which I was exhausted. It took months and months to settle in that I need to take better care of myself. And then people would come to me with psychiatric histories, and I began to realize I don't really have to think about those aspects of it. I can think about it in an entirely different way. Nobody is going to read my note except me. They say, what are you talking about here? You think this might be a jinn or might be a fallen angel. Uh, so that became very freeing. So now I pay no attention to what's going on in psychiatry at all. I don't know anybody who's doing that now. I don't keep up with anybody that I used to keep up with. I always thought I was a little around the bend anyway. I think. Now I
Well,
entirely do soul detective work, which is a kind of shamanic work, augmented by a lot of stuff that's very helpful, makes it more accurate and more powerful.
well,
And some of the people I see are chronically mentally ill people.
really?
Some have had psychotic breaks and have been able to come off medicines. I don't recommend that they do that. They want to do that. do it without telling me sometimes. One of them in particular, I said, I'll deal with the spirit aspects of what's going on with you, but you keep seeing your psychiatrist. If you want to do anything different about your meds, you talk to him about that. And I've had a couple that went off their meds and did well for years, who were diagnosed with bipolar disorder,
Hmm.
had been hospitalized for psychosis. So I've begun to believe that what we're doing may be something that's more effective, less harmful than the standard practice now of psychiatry and psychology. I don't want to say that we should just abandon all that stuff, because well, I'm not ready to treat everybody in the world. And a lot of the people that we treat don't have this kind of background, not as deeply as Barbara and I do. And so they're not comfortable dealing with these really severe cases. But I still think, and I'll just lay this out there for your audience, the future of mental health treatment is what we do in Soul Detective.
And hey, I applaud that. That's fantastic. That's I did read a little bit about the soul detective process on the website, and I think I saw a snippet from a seminar maybe that was on there. Um, I might be thinking of something else, so don't quote me on that. But what I read at least was eye-opening, and yeah, it was I don't know, made me kind of believe in the work of psychiatry on that level, the level you're doing it now, more than the more clinical side of things. Um, my next question is, and I lost my spot.
How about if I give you an answer and then you can ask me a question?
Yeah, yeah, read my mind, go for it.
I want to say that one of the influences as I was going through this transition process from mainstream psychiatry to whatever the heck it is we do, I read a book by Shakuntala Modi, who's a psychiatrist. The title of the book is Remarkable Healings, and it's worth a read if you're serious about learning this stuff. In her introductory chapter, she says there are 5 causes of mental illness. And I agree with this for the most part. One is trauma, psychological trauma in this life. And that is recognized in general psychiatry and psychology, but maybe not as much as it needs to be. I think there's some increase in that. The second is psychological trauma in a past life. Well, you try to sell that to anything mainstream. It's a whack job for sure. Third is spirit attachment by earthbound spirits. That means dead people, human beings.
Like what you experienced.
Right. Like what lots of people experience and don't have any idea. Fourth is spirit attachments by other things besides humans. This, of course, is a giant opening into all kinds of craziness. And the fourth was karma. According to her, it was karma.
Oh,
Fifth.
the karma. Okay. That was the
Now,
fifth one? Karma?
I would like to relabel the fifth thing, not just karma, but lineage issues, ancestral issues,
Okay.
can be transmitted to the patient through some process, whether it's DNA or something else.
Is this on the order of the sins of the father kind of a thing?
Yes,
Okay. Okay.
something like that. There are a couple of very specific ways you can describe that, but I'm not sure I entirely love the idea of karma. But there's something else there that's not an immediate spirit attachment. At least it doesn't look that way. So nowhere on that list is disordered neurotransmitters.
That's true. I didn't hear that.
And in fact, when you go back before the psychopharmacology era, which really began in the 50s and didn't get rolling until the 70s or 80s, psychiatry was very much aligned with psychoanalysis, which for all its flaws, distortions of human life, was based on the idea that what people were suffering from was understandable in terms of emotional conflict and early trauma.
Okay.
But it was hampered by Freud's assumptions about things, and people didn't like all of that. And a failure to relate the impact of trauma to the way the nervous system handles trauma. We're much better at understanding that now in terms of how the autonomic nervous system responds to assault and escape from assault and so on, and everything that falls from that. So there's more of an emphasis on assessing adverse childhood events. There's an ACE score. Some kinds of psychotherapy really pay close attention to that in a way that's a little more independent of the psychoanalytic Freudian kind of approach.
Gotcha.
But
So
boy, when you
I'm
get
sure.
psychiatric training now, it's all about the make a medical diagnosis and give them a medicine, and somebody else is going to do the therapy.
Wow. That sounds rather backwards to me. I mean,
That's where it is now, and
that's
especially in public mental health. The psychiatrist in a mental health center is there to write the scripts, and the therapy is done by other people, mostly young people just out of training who've learned some kind of psychotherapy technique. Lacking a lot of the things I think I learned in the 70s when I was in residency. I was learning how to listen to people and talk to people from the old guard who had been doing this for a long time and focused on how to relate to the patient, how to get them to say what they need to say, how to learn how to listen. And then there was a shift at some point in the 80s, I think, when the big mouths of psychiatry at conferences would get up in front of the audience and say, no more of this open-ended question stuff. We need to fill out our questionnaires to get the list of symptoms so we have the right diagnosis. And what I was taught is you ask the person, tell me what's going on with you, something open-ended like that, and then you listen until they stop talking. And then you say, what else? And then you listen some more. And then you say, what else? Until when you say what else and they say, I don't know what else to tell you. Then you can do your checklist. That's how I learned it. And we were being directly told, don't do that.
wow.
You have to ask them, how many hours do you sleep at night? How much weight have you lost or gained? Checklist stuff from the diagnostic manual.
Wow.
So you end up looking at the screen on the computer to make sure you're following the steps instead of looking at the person you're talking to. That's where we're at. Okay, that's my soapbox speech.
And now
So Tim, what's your other question here?
my other question was regarding I just had, sorry, I got a list of things on a separate screen here. I guess the next question is to tell me a little more about the soul detective movement, I guess we'll call it. You're in multiple countries and you're educating people on how to self-diagnose possession. Is that correct? Among other things. Did I get that wrong? Did I get that right?
Close.
Okay.
Yeah, we teach in Bulgaria, and we have a group in Spain that we're teaching, or I'm teaching. I'm bilingual. In Bulgaria, we work through translators, and then in the States, we teach online. The training is for therapists who have people come in that the tools they have aren't enough to get to the origin of what's going on with them. So we teach a method where the first step is to get centered. And on my website, on the homepage, there's a list of some YouTubes I made talking about centering, doing centering exercises. Because you got to be in the middle of your energy bubble for the healing to get in and last. So if you're not centered, either it never gets in or it gets in, but you weren't really in it, so it doesn't endure over time. We use a way of getting information about what's going on that relies on the client's inner wisdom. If we're in person, we'll muscle test, like have them hold out a thing, say, my name is Robert Alcorn.
My name is Robert Alcorn.
And hold. Say, my name is Robert Acorn.
No, I'm going to say my name is Joe Biden.
And hold. Okay, so that's not true. When we say something that isn't true, our muscle response unlocks.
It twitches or it goes off kilter or something.
You can't hold it.
Right.
It gives away. We call it unlocks, whereas it locks to a response that's true. Since
Gotcha.
we work over the internet, we may surrogate for that person, like we tune into their energy field and then either use a pendulum or a finger muscle test to
Oh,
see
okay.
what's going on. And it sounds pretty crazy that you could do therapy that way, but I believe the reason it works is because we set up sacred space. We put a pyramid of golden light around us, with golden capstones above and below, with angels all around us, warrior angels, Arcturians, a big sphere of divine grace, and a frequency net to screen out any detrimental artificial intelligence, which we think is probably behind all of the other programs. The AI is disconnected from source. It needs energy, so it draws energy from human suffering. And it's invented many ways for humans to suffer. So whatever's going on, we find it and we ask for a priority if there are a lot of things going on. Sometimes there's just one thing, sometimes there are 7 things. Take them in order. And with the help of the person's spiritual guidance team and our own spiritual guidance team, we have a separate way to deal with each thing. The Catholic Church has a procedure called exorcism, where if something bad is going on, they kick out the thing and send it to hell and lock it up. But they don't really distinguish between what's a deceased relative that's just hanging on to you and what might be what we could call a fallen angel, or they would call it a demon. And they have the belief that demons cannot be rehabilitated. Well, we have a different point of view. We want to see if it's Uncle Jim that's attached to you. We want to help Jim get to heaven. And one popular reason people don't go is because they don't know they're dead. Being dead is so much like being alive. You see everything, you hear everything. You just haven't noticed that your spirit left your physical body. And then if it's what we call a fallen angel, our belief system is these are beings created by the creator to serve, and they got separated from source. So they got drawn into the dark side and they get energy from tormenting people. Well, we just help them get reconnected to source, see who they really are, and then that fallen angel becomes a standing up angel again and gets retrained back to their original job, which is a win-win solution. It's a win for the angel and a big win for the client, because then that entity is not going to come back if it's been rehabilitated.
That makes sense.
And we have a different procedure for ancestral wounds. We have one for invasion by jinn, popularly known as genies. They're a whole different category of entity, and we've found a way to make peace with them and help them get better and help our clients get better. If there's an ET implant in somebody, we have a procedure to find that and to ask to remove it. And a lot of things happen that would be considered magic, except it's divine intervention doing things. So we work a lot with divine energy and always for win-win situations, which is the hardest with the reptilian kingdom when there's reptilian invasion, but we get higher dimensional beings to rehabilitate the reptilians too. So that's what we do in soul detective work. It's pretty far out.
But it helps people. I mean, you've seen results.
It helps when other things don't.
Me again?
You.
I'm asking if you have seen results, the positive results of this work.
Absolutely. I wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't work. The reason I
Okay.
do this is it works. And it works better than what I was doing before when I was obeying all the rules. But there are certain kinds of people who come to us who don't do well in traditional therapy practice. One I mentioned is intuitive people. And there's a lot of overlap here, but the other category is somebody who has been to 6 or 7 other healers, or even more than that sometimes. And maybe a little bit of help here and there, but mostly didn't help, didn't last. So we're kind of the court of last resort in a sense, in many cases. And then what we find is the stuff other healers don't like to think about, don't want to deal with. Many healers are very uncomfortable with dealing with dark entities. It's even a vague way to say it, but that's how it's often referred to, as dark entities or negative energies. It sounds even more vague because what we're talking about is conscious beings who have it in for us, who don't like us. They're exploitative of us. They want to kill us because we're human. And so people who are all love and light and sweetness and so on and want to make everything happy inside their clients, if they find something like that, they get scared of it. Or they rationalize that it is an aspect of that person's shadow psychology.
Are you referring to the higher self or no?
No,
Okay.
I'm talking about the theory that if a client believes they're being attacked by a dark entity, they may have an experience that's telling them that. The healer may conclude that this is really their own psychology
Oh,
being externalized by the client, him or herself.
gotcha.
And it's interesting to run into that theory because it's another way of kind of blaming the patient for what's wrong with you. You're not getting well, so you must want to stay sick, that kind of idea.
Hmm.
And one of the authors who writes about how to remove these dark beings is William Baldwin. There's a bunch of excellent material about that. He comes right out and says, these dark force entities, is what he calls them, are definitely not your shadow side. They're something altogether separate from the person.
Okay.
That's our experience with it. So if you're too afraid to deal with that, then you got to make up some other story for what's going on with people. Well, those are the kinds of things I like to say I'm a specialist in removing negative energies. I should put that on my business card or something.
Doesn't hurt.
But there's a lot more to Soul Detective than just chasing out the bad guys or reforming the bad guy. Because some of it is really trauma work, trauma in a past life, parallel life, all kinds of weird stuff that's not supposed to really exist. But when you correct it, they get better.
Can't ignore the results, can you?
Yeah. We help people connect with their soul's mission and where they came from. And once you get on track with why your soul incarnated in this really interesting time in human history, then that makes the road worth the trip. Even if there are bumps in the road, when you know where you're going, you can get past that. And it just makes people blossom. We watch people who go through the training, and they're like a flower that just opens up as they clear off everything. We practice on each other in the training, so everybody gets a chance to get a lot of treatment as we work. It's a 13-day training.
Wow.
Usually it's taught in 5 different weekends, some 2 days, some 3 days, usually online, except in Bulgaria. They're all together in a room. Then after that, if it's a method that somebody really wants to master, we have a certification program where we get together, share cases, I watch people work, there's reading assignments and an ethics course. So all of that's on my website. And we're looking for people to become teachers, to take the course if it's really meaningful to them, get certified, and then because we believe that in the future, mental health care will be more complementary, that not just the emotional body and the mental body, but also this whole spiritual realm that affects the mental and emotional. That it's just so much more effective and therapy is so much shorter and longer lasting.
And they get to pass it on too. They learn the things, they get to pass it on. The techniques they get to learn. I can't talk today. I'm so sorry. If they get to learn your techniques, they get to pass it on. So I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So let's go back to dark entities real quick. Are you of the mind that there are not demons or a hellscape entities, I guess we'll call them, or where do we land on that? Or are they fallen angels that can be rehabilitated?
Okay, well, first of all, from the Catholic perspective, it may have changed, but generally speaking, they have held that any kind of spirit that's affecting the penitent, as they would call them, is coming from Satan. Not Satan himself, but some kind of devil.
Mhm.
So there's no room there for Uncle Jim or your grandmother trying to help and knocking it up because they don't know what to do. So to identify what is the nature of the spirit is very important. Now, you mentioned the word diagnosis in connection with what soul detectives are taught. We don't teach anybody to diagnose anything because that's a medical term and that's forbidden territory. What we're
Evaluation?
doing is based on an intellectual system that is utterly different from the medical system.
Okay.
What we want to do is identify the person or thing that's causing the trouble, which is invisible because it's not a physical entity. So that can be a dead human, or an earthbound spirit. And then the issue may be very much have to do with what's wrong with that ghost. What are the ghost issues? The person who's hosting the ghost is feeling whatever the ghost stuff is. That's fascinating enough in itself. If you know nothing else but that and how to clear that up, you can do a lot of good. Then there are the darker things. The jinn are a particular issue. They're well known in the Islamic world.
Yeah.
They are everywhere on the planet. They belong here. They're elemental spirits. They're part of the earth system.
Hmm.
They may have come from somewhere else a million years ago, but they've been here long enough to be. Like if I live in Ireland for 50 years, I become Irish, whether I was born
Okay.
there or not. So they're of the earth. We're not going to send them away anywhere. We have to negotiate peace with them. They have their grievances about humans and how they've been treated used for magic and so on like that. Then there are the dark force entities, and this is Baldwin's term again, and this is what generally people would call demons.
Okay.
My experience with that is, generally speaking, these are fallen angels.
Okay.
And I learned that by doing an interview with them. We dialogue with these critters in a secure setting, in the presence of lots of angels, uh, and ask them to look in their heart and see what they see. And they, generally speaking, find a spark of light in their heart, although they think they're serving the darkness. And then they got to, this is cognitive dissonance. How can I be a big bad guy if I've got light in the center of my heart?
Gotcha.
So then I'll ask them sometimes, Barbara doesn't always do this, but I like to do this. Where were you before you came into the darkness? And they remember being in the angelic realm and how they got tricked or frustrated trying to help us stupid humans that don't listen and whatever. They get mad and then they're caught. If they get mad, they get caught. Or if they're lured by power sometimes. So they can return to the angelic realm once they figure out their situation. So that's what Barbara likes to call a win-win situation. And it is a spectacular thing to witness one of these beings ascending to the retraining school and out of the darkness.
Is it more of a sensation that you feel, or is there an actual physical element to it?
I feel it emotionally.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get a visual about it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I wouldn't say it's physical, although emotions are reflected in physical sensations in the human body. So yeah, you feel a great relief when the angel says, I see a speck of light in my heart. Suddenly the defiance is gone, the threatening, trash talking stuff they do, gone.
Right. I know that
So within the
sensation.
dark world, there's a structure. There's a hierarchy, like a military order. You can have a dark force entity who's a flunky, or one who's somewhere, like a major or a captain. And there are the generals, those we call an archdemon. Everybody's got a boss. It turns out that the archdemons are bossed around by reptilians.
Space
That was,
reptilians.
yeah.
Okay.
So if you're having trouble believing any of this so far, this gets even weirder. So we've had to learn how to deal with those. We don't necessarily dialogue with them directly. We have helpers from upstairs. The beings from Arcturus have come to help us on planet Earth about that. They're amazingly beautiful and compassionate beings. We can clear that stuff out. And it gets very complex figuring out what they do, the reptilians do, because they're vastly more intelligent than we are, and nastier than the worst of us, and so on. So there is that structure to the dark world. And that's important to know about, because if you just go in there with the Bible in hand and threaten them with being sent to hell, you can end up like the priest in the Exorcist movie with your head twisted around,
Yeah.
thrown down the stairs.
Don't want that.
We never get that kind of attack.
That's good. The
Our time's almost up here.
sorry.
But I want to say that the things we do, we work very hard to make it safe all the way through, and we guard the well-being of our students and our practitioners as they're doing soul detective work. So that's a top priority.
Good to know. So if you are looking to get into this, out there,
It's people who work with clients they're just all tangled up in the underworld of energetic cords and darkness, and they just, talking doesn't stop it. You have to look at exactly what's happening and unravel it.
Gotcha. But for those new to this practice who seek you out, for example, and want to learn this stuff, you're telling them you're going to enter into things safely. You're not going to throw these people in the deep end. It's like, good luck.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And once they learn everything in the training, if there are some issues they don't want to work with, then they refer those to Bob.
Bob gets to handle it. Wow, you do carry all the luggage, don't you, Bob?
Yeah.
All right. So I guess that'll be it for today, unless there's anything for you to add. Do you want to give us your website one more time?
The website is Soul Detective, spelled SOULDETECTIVE.net. Like
.net. Got it.
Dragnet used to find the bad guys, and Soul Detective is a spiritual dragnet of figuring out what's going on. And really, we're looking to see what's happening with the soul, that part of you that goes from incarnation to incarnation. It's kind of like getting a new car when you get a new body and a new incarnation.
I know you're short on
Yeah.
time, but I do have a follow-up. You actually brought it back to my mind, back to my it popped back in my head. There's been talk, I think it was Tucker Carlson of all people. He said that he learned about alien entities and all that fun stuff, and one of the things that scared him the most was that aliens saw us as soul vessels, and that they're looking to either pluck out our souls and replace it with theirs, or something along those lines. I don't know. Is that related to your work?
That's another 3-hour lecture.
I should have brought it up earlier. Sorry.
The extraterrestrial world, or I call them star civilizations, are extremely varied. There are many beneficial ones. There are a few bad eggs in the group. And one of those bad egg type seeks to steal souls from people and put their consciousness into the body. Those are generally a variety of the reptilian nature, where reptilians are just out for themselves. They are service to self. They don't do service to others. And they have to have some opening to get in. They could promise somebody, for example, that if you give me your soul, I'll give you power and wealth, and you'll live 400 years or something. We'll give you medical technology to prolong your life. Well, that might sound good to somebody, but when we are of a higher vibration, then we don't fall for something like that. And we know that our soul is the most precious thing we could ever have. And we don't sell out for riches or fame. We stay true to why we came.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, on that note, I guess we'll say goodbye. Thank you both so much for being on the show. The website is at the bottom of the screen, and we will say goodbye for now. My name is Tim Sedano. I'm the host of Paranormal Insight. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching and listening. Please click the subscribe button and activate notifications for future episodes and other content. If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook and Instagram under @paranormal_insight.